Welcome to the program. It's taken time, but the Coalition today unveiled its proposed slower, no-frills replacement for Labor's national broadband network. $6 billion instead of $43, and relying on business to do much of the work to create a privately run system. The opposition would replace Labor's high-speed fibre-to-the-home model for 97% of Australians with a mix of technologies and existing networks. The Coalition says Labor simply can't be trusted to deliver. Labor says the Coalition would take Australia back to the dark ages. Shortly I'll be talking with Tony Abbott, but first, political editor Heather Hewitt reports.
Today we announce a plan to deliver faster and affordable broadband.
Unlike the government's broadband scheme, we will not be risking somewhere between $43 and $86 billion of taxpayers' money on the creation of a white elephant.
The sort of network that Tony Smith and Tony Abbott are promising is a blast from the past. It cannot meet the needs of the Australian community going forward.
It was the announcement the opposition had long promised and which it finally delivered this morning to try to counter the government's national broadband network plan.
All of this today is about showing that there is a much better way.
We are committing up to $2.75 billion with the expectation of leveraging at least another $750 million from the private sector to create an open access optic fibre backhaul network that telecommunications companies can access.
Like the government's proposal, it covers 97% of Australia's homes, all Australians, 97% of all Australians, with speeds between 30 and 100 megabits per second.
But that's where any similarity with the government's plan ends. Instead of Labor's fibre optic network being rolled out around the country, a coalition government would use a mix of technologies to improve broadband speeds and rely on the private sector to help deliver this. It would invest $2 billion in grants to encourage getting a private network up and running.
We will not be creating a bureaucratic, stodgy, cumbersome and unresponsive government monopoly.
It will consign Australia to the digital dark ages. The Coalition's 19th century policy in 12 years will shut down the NBN and destroy 25,000 jobs.
The opposition claims it's saving taxpayers' money, but at their news conference, the shadow finance and communications ministers were repeatedly unable to answer this key question.
How many households are going to have access to 100 megabits a second and when?
Well, we are not doing what the government's doing. Okay, we are not running fibre down every street at taxpayers' expense, whether people want it or not. What we are doing is we are providing that platform for competition for it to be rolled out commercially.
This is a complete sellout of regional and rural Australians, and the National Party especially should be ashamed of themselves.
All of the key population centres in Australia will have in their proximity the fibre which will enable 100 megabits per second.
What that means for Australians living outside cities is anyone's guess. During feisty questioning at times, Andrew Robb was asked to explain if this was such an important policy, why wasn't Tony Abbott there for the announcement?
Tony Abbott was in Sydney today. We've got two announcements today. He's in Sydney today he met with Scott Morrison, who's just... I'm answering... I'm sorry, I'm answering your question. We think that these two issues, the boat people, is a huge issue.
In other words, the opposition wanted two big cracks at media attention today, especially with the arrival of another boatload of asylum seekers this morning. As well, immigration spokesman Scott Morrison was fresh back from a lightning trip to Nauru, where the coalition hopes to reopen an asylum seeker processing centre.
Well, the point we're trying to make is that we want to stop people coming to Australia illegally.
I understand that Mr Abbott was so ashamed of his decision to cut the broadband today. Didn't turn up to his own event. But here we go. We're at ours. 1, 2, Three.
Yay!
Julia Gillard was opening a GP super clinic, but her key announcement today was on water, as she preempted a yet-to-be-released report by the Murray-Darling Basin Authority.
I am determined we will do what is necessary to implement the Murray-Darling Basin Authority plan. We will buy water as necessary from willing sellers to get the water going down the river to restore the river to health.
Well, how does she know how much water the Murray-Darling Basin Authority is going to recommend?
The first thing Prime Minister Gillard should do is release the report from the Murray-Darling Commission looking into the future of the basin.
It won't be on this campaign, but other announcements by the major parties are now flowing at a frenetic pace as election day looms. Then there are the ongoing claims and counterclaims over policy costings. After Andrew Robb last night released a media statement accusing Labor of pork barrelling in marginal seats, the government argued it was riddled with errors.
On page 2, there's another one of those. They've got down $15 million for an investment in a club, when in fact it's only $1.5 million.
Look, there were a couple of typos in a document referring to the Labor Party. Couple of typos.
Mr Robb hasn't done his homework.
Wayne Swan, in my view, is starting to look mildly hysterical.
It's the sort of stuff that's typical of election campaigns, even this one, which has had so many controversial and unprecedented moments.
The latest is the revelation a Queensland Liberal National Party candidate
criticised Jews, gays and women in his university days. Labor is convinced he now has no chance of winning the highly marginal ALP-held seat of Dawson.